Imagine waking up tomorrow and the price of oil isn't $80, not $100, but $200 a barrel. Fuel stations empty, flights grounded, food prices exploding. And the global economy on the edge of collapse? This isn't fiction. This is what happens when one narrow waterway, the Strait of Hormuz, carrying nearly 20% of the world's oil, becomes a battlefield. When tension between two powers, Iran and the United States, stops being politics and starts becoming economic warfare. Because when oil stops flowing, everything stops. Markets panic, currencies fall, nations struggle to survive. And suddenly, this isn't just their war, it becomes your crisis. Today, we are not asking if chaos can happen. We are asking, are we ready for the day it does? It was never about oil. It was about control. And men understand control as responsibility. When a man sees resources threatened, his instinct is not just to react, but to secure, to dominate the uncertainty before it dominates the uncertainty before it dominates him. In a crisis like oil hitting $200, the battlefield isn't just geography, it's psychological. Men are wired to protect what sustains life: energy, stability, order. But when control slips, pressure rises, and that pressure exposes a deeper truth: how fragile the illusion of control really is. What looks like conflict between nations is, at its core, a reflection of how men respond to power and fear. From a man's perspective, losing control feels like failure, like something slipping through his hands that he was meant to hold together. And from a woman's perspective, that same moment reveals something else entirely: the cost of that pressure, the silent weight men carry when they feel responsible for outcomes they cannot fully control. The rising price of oil becomes more than economics. It becomes a symbol of tension between expectation and reality. When systems break and prices surge, men don't just see numbers, they see threat, identity, and the urgent need to regain control before everything collapses around them. One strait can hold the weight of the entire world, and one spark can expose how men respond when everything is on the line. When a narrow passage like Hormuz becomes a flashpoint, it's not just crude oil that's at risk. It's control, stability, and identity. Men are conditioned to anticipate threats and act before they unfold. But when the scale becomes global, that instinct is pushed beyond limits. The idea that one disruption can ripple across economies forces a confrontation with vulnerability, something many men are taught to suppress rather than understand. One spark is enough to reveal how differently pressure is processed between men and women. From a man's perspective, escalation feels like a call to act, to fix, to regain order before chaos spreads. It becomes a test of capability, a moment where hesitation feels like failure. From a woman's perspective, that same urgency often highlights the emotional cost, the tension, the silence, the patience of a burden that isn't always shared outwardly. The breakdown isn't just in systems or supply chains. It's in the internal struggle between maintaining strength and acknowledging fear. A global breakdown doesn't begin with destruction. It begins with the moment control feels uncertain, and the mind races to reclaim it before everything slips beyond reach. When supply chains snap, the illusion of stability disappears in an instant, and men feel it as a direct threat to their role as providers. What once seemed distant, ships moving, crude oil, petroleum flowing, markets adjusting, suddenly becomes personal. Prices rise, shelves thin out, and pressure builds. For men, this isn't just disruption. It's a signal that something they are responsible for, holding together, is beginning to fracture. The instinct is immediate. Fix it, control it, restore order before the consequences reach home. When systems break, the psychological weight doesn't spread evenly, it concentrates. From a man's perspective, every shortage feels like a test of capability, a quiet question asking whether he can still provide in a world that's becoming unpredictable. There's no room in that mindset for visible uncertainty. From a woman's perspective, the same moment reveals the silent tension, the long pauses, the overthinking, the burden carried without words. She doesn't just see the problem, she sees the pressure shaping him from within. When civilizations feel it, it's not only through economies or headlines, but through households where control feels like it's slipping, and the urgency to hold everything together grows heavier with every passing moment. The $200 barrel isn't a price, it's a signal that something deeper is breaking beneath the surface. For men, numbers like this don't stay on screens. They translate into pressure, into responsibility, into the quiet realization that the systems they rely on are no longer predictable. It's not just about fuel becoming expensive. It's about stability becoming uncertain. And when uncertainty rises, so does the internal demand to regain control before that instability reaches the people who depend on them. The warning is not just economic, it's psychological. And men feel it as a shift in ground beneath their feet. From a man's perspective, a spike like this triggers urgency, a need to act, to adjust, to prepare for impact before it fully arrives. It becomes a test of readiness, a moment where hesitation feels dangerous. From a woman's perspective, that same shift reveals something more subtle. The tightening of silence, the increased focus, the weight of unspoken calculations happening behind the scenes. She sees not just the reaction, but the pressure shaping it. The moment a price becomes a warning, it stops being about markets and starts becoming about survival, where every decision feels heavier and every second carries the quiet tension of what might come next. Economic wars don't need bullets to destroy nations, because the most powerful damage happens where it cannot be seen. When oil surges to $200, no explosions are heard, yet pressure builds in homes, in decisions, in the quiet calculations of survival. For men, this kind of war doesn't feel distant. It feels immediate and personal. It challenges their sense of control, their role as providers, and their ability to maintain stability in a system that is suddenly unpredictable. The battlefield shifts from land to mind, where every rising cost becomes a reminder that something larger is slipping beyond reach. Economic war reshapes how men carry responsibility under pressure. From a man's perspective, this is not just about adapting, it's about proving he can still hold everything together when the rules are changing. The instinct is to push harder, think faster, and regain control before the impact deepens. But that intensity often stays internal. From a woman's perspective, the absence of visible conflict doesn't mean the absence of struggle. She sees the tension in silence, the weight of expectations, the constant mental strain of trying to stay ahead of a crisis that cannot be physically confronted. Destruction in economic wars happens slowly through erosion rather than impact. Where confidence weakens, certainty fades, and the pressure to maintain control grows heavier with every passing moment. The real question is not whether the shock will come, but who is prepared to withstand it when it does. When oil hits $200 and systems begin to strain, survival stops being theoretical and becomes deeply personal. Now, for men, this moment triggers something primal, the need to assess, to adapt, to protect. It's no longer about watching events unfold. It's about stepping into uncertainty and trying to maintain control in a world that feels like it's shifting beneath their feet. The shock isn't just economic. It's psychological, challenging how men define strength when stability disappears. Survival under pressure exposes how men process fear and responsibility differently. From a man's perspective, the instinct is to stay composed, to carry the weight silently, and to find solutions even when none are clear. There's an internal dialogue that demands action, that equates hesitation with weakness. But from a woman's perspective, survival looks different. She sees beyond the surface, recognizing the strain behind the calm, the effort it takes to appear steady when everything is uncertain. She understands that survival isn't just about action. It's about endurance, the emotional weight that often goes unspoken. The shock reveals that survival is not equally distributed. It favors those who can adapt, who can remain focused while others panic. For men, this becomes a test of identity, a moment where they must reconcile the need for control with the reality of unpredictability. For women, it becomes a moment of insight where the true cost of that pressure becomes visible in ways that numbers and headlines can never fully capture.